The alien soldier stood at the edge of the dense jungle, his elongated figure clad in armor that shimmered like liquid silver under the planet's twin suns. His rifle, a sleek weapon bristling with technology beyond human comprehension, hung loosely at his side. Behind him, his squad laughed in their melodic, alien tongue, their tones dripping with disdain as they examined the crude human firearm laid out before them. Primitive, one of them sneered, kicking the battered sniper rifle with a clawed foot. The rifle, standard issue for Earth's dwindling resistance forces, seemed almost laughable compared to the elegant weapons the invaders carried. Is this what they expect to fight us with? It's like bringing a stick to a plasma storm. The others joined in the derisive laughter, their voices echoing through the humid air. None of them noticed the subtle glint from the tree line, nor the silence that had fallen over the surrounding wildlife, a silence that signaled the presence of a predator far more dangerous than they realized. In the distance, hidden among the thick foliage and expertly camouflaged in mud and leaves, Sergeant Ethan Cole exhaled slowly. He peered through the scope of his primitive sniper rifle, his body perfectly still despite the sweltering heat. Every muscle was poised, every breath calculated. These aliens might have technology eons ahead of humanity, but there was one thing they didn't have: Ethan's experience. They didn't know what it was like to hunt or to be hunted. To them, war was clean and distant, fought with precision from the safety of their floating citadels. For humans, it had always been dirty, desperate, and up close. Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger as he whispered to himself, "Let's see how your fancy armor handles a bullet." The Galactic Union had dismissed Earth as an insignificant backwater planet when their exploratory probes first arrived. Its gravity was oppressive, its environment hostile, and its life forms, humans, laughably frail compared to the Union's genetically perfected races. But humanity's planet held resources that the Union needed. A rare mineral hidden deep within the Earth's crust was crucial for their advanced energy systems. The Union's solution was simple: invade, extract, and subjugate. What they didn't expect was resistance. Ethan had been a soldier long before the invasion. He'd served in wars fought over borders that no longer mattered, learned to navigate terrains that now lay in alien-occupied zones, and survived situations where death seemed inevitable. When the Galactic Union descended, declaring humanity's surrender a foregone conclusion, Ethan didn't flinch. He retreated into the shadows, where he'd always worked best. In the weeks following the invasion, human resistance fighters like Ethan struck hard and fast. Their weapons were outdated, their resources scarce, but they had one advantage the aliens hadn't accounted for: humans were predators. The Galactic Union, for all its might, was unaccustomed to true combat. Their soldiers relied on superior technology and overwhelming numbers, but they lacked the primal instincts that millennia of survival had bred into Earth's inhabitants. To the Union, war was a game of tactics and strategy. To humans, it was life or death. Ethan's shot rang out like thunder in the otherwise silent jungle. The lead alien soldier jerked backward, his shimmering armor unable to stop the velocity of the bullet that pierced through his helmet. The squad's laughter turned to chaos as they scrambled for cover, their eyes scanning wildly for the unseen attacker. Ethan remained still, his breathing steady. He adjusted his aim, picking his next target as the aliens fired blindly into the trees. Their energy weapons sent searing bolts of plasma scorching through the foliage, but they might as well have been shooting at ghosts. Another squeeze of the trigger, another alien soldier dropped. This time, the squad leader barked orders, their language incomprehensible but their panic universal. Ethan almost felt bad for them. Almost. He shifted his position, crawling silently through the underbrush to avoid detection. His rifle, patched together with scavenged parts, was a relic compared to the alien arsenal, but it had one thing they didn't: familiarity. Ethan knew every scratch and groove on the weapon, every quirk in its mechanism. It was an extension of himself, a tool honed through years of necessity. The aliens were learning, though. Their movements became more coordinated, their weapons calibrated to scan for heat signatures. Ethan smirked. Too little, too late, he muttered under his breath. By the time Ethan picked off the last alien soldier, the jungle was eerily silent once more. He stood and surveyed the carnage, his rifle slung over his shoulder. The Galactic Union's elite forces, reduced to a lifeless heap, had been no match for a single human with a primitive weapon. Ethan approached the body of the squad leader, his boots crunching against the alien underbrush. He crouched and examined the armor, noting the intricate circuitry and advanced materials. With a grim satisfaction, he pulled a small communication device from the leader's belt. He activated it, knowing full well that the Galactic Union would hear him. "This is Sergeant Ethan Cole," he said, his voice calm but laced with defiance. "You wanted prey. You found predators. Next time you think about mocking human weapons, remember this moment. Because we're just getting started." He crushed the device under his boot, leaving the shattered pieces among the fallen aliens. Adjusting his pack, he disappeared back into the jungle, his form swallowed by the shadows. The Galactic Union had underestimated humanity once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again, not if Ethan had anything to say about it. The Galactic Union's high command was in uproar. The reports from their reconnaissance teams on Earth had initially dismissed the planet's defenses as negligible. Yet now, they faced a troubling reality. Entire squads of their best soldiers were being wiped out by humans, these so-called prey who had turned the hunt against them. High Commander Orveth, a towering figure with translucent, scale-like skin and an air of authority, stared at the holographic display in front of him. The feed replayed the final moments of the jungle squad. The grainy footage showed his soldiers firing wildly into the trees, their precision breaking down under the relentless assault of an unseen assailant. The display froze on the last shot, the squad leader falling, a single human bullet piercing his helmet. "Explain this," Orveth demanded, his voice cold and sharp. Around him, the gathered strategists shifted uncomfortably. "They are using guerrilla tactics, Commander," said one of the advisors, her tentacled appendages coiling nervously. "They are unpredictable. And their environment, Earth, is uniquely suited for ambushes. The dense foliage, the heat, it's a nightmare for our senses." "It's not the environment," Orveth growled. "It's them. These humans. They fight with a ferocity we didn't anticipate." The room fell silent as Orveth's piercing gaze swept across his subordinates. "Deploy the Vorthian hunters," he ordered. "I want this." Ethan Cole, neutralized. "Show these humans the true meaning of fear." Ethan crouched in the ruins of a once thriving city, its skyline now broken and scarred by alien bombardments. This was humanity's reality, survival amidst devastation. But even in the face of such loss, Ethan found purpose. Every alien soldier he took down was one step closer to reclaiming Earth. He wasn't alone in his efforts. The resistance had grown, a patchwork force of survivors who refused to bow to their alien overlords. They communicated through encrypted channels, sharing intel and coordinating strikes. Ethan, however, remained a lone wolf. It wasn't that he distrusted the others, he simply worked better this way. Tonight, he was tracking a convoy, a supply line that the aliens had grown complacent about. They assumed their air superiority meant humans couldn't touch them. They were wrong. Through his binoculars, Ethan watched the convoy wind through the ruins, its vehicles levitating just above the cracked pavement. Alien soldiers marched alongside the transport, their movements precise, their weapons glowing with an eerie blue light. Ethan set his sights on the lead vehicle. He adjusted the scope of his rifle, calculating the distance and wind speed. One shot was all he'd get before the aliens realized what was happening. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. His heartbeat slowed, his world narrowing to the crosshairs of his scope. The shot rang out, shattering the quiet of the night. The lead vehicle erupted in a plume of fire and smoke, its advanced shielding unable to withstand the force of a well-placed explosive round. The alien soldiers scrambled, their formations breaking as they sought cover. Ethan moved quickly, repositioning before they could pinpoint his location. He had no intention of engaging them directly. His goal was disruption, sowing chaos in their ranks. From his new vantage point, he picked off another soldier, then another. Each shot was calculated, purposeful. The aliens' plasma weapons lit up the ruins, their panicked fire scorching everything but their target. Ethan smirked. So much for superior technology. But then, something unexpected happened. The air around the convoy shimmered, and a new figure emerged, a towering alien clad in obsidian armor. This wasn't a standard soldier. This was a Vorthian hunter. Ethan froze, his instincts screaming at him to retreat. The Vorthian's helmet turned toward his position, and Ethan knew he'd been spotted. The hunter moved with terrifying speed, covering the ground between them in a blur. Ethan barely had time to dive out of the way as a plasma blade sliced through the air where he'd been moments before. He rolled, coming up with his rifle aimed at the alien's chest. He fired, but the hunter's armor absorbed the shot. The Vorthian retaliated, its blade carving through the rubble with ease. Ethan scrambled to keep his distance, his mind racing. This wasn't a fight he could win head-on. Using the ruins to his advantage, Ethan darted through the maze of crumbled buildings, setting traps as he went. He led the hunter into a narrow alley, where he'd rigged an explosive charge. As the alien closed in, Ethan detonated the trap, the blast collapsing the alley around them. Dust and debris filled the air. Ethan coughed, his ears ringing as he climbed out of the wreckage. He knew better than to assume the hunter was dead. Sure enough, a shadow emerged from the rubble, the Vorthian's armor scorched but intact. Persistent, Ethan muttered. He pulled out his last grenade, a relic of Earth's past wars. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He armed the grenade and waited, his eyes locked on the approaching alien. As the hunter lunged, Ethan threw the grenade and dove for cover. The explosion was deafening, the shockwave knocking him off his feet. When he looked up, the hunter was finally down, its armor shattered. Ethan approached cautiously, his rifle trained on the alien's motionless form. "You should have stayed in your fancy ships," he said, his voice low. "Earth's not as easy as you thought." He left the ruins before reinforcements could arrive, disappearing into the night like a ghost. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But Ethan had sent a message: humanity wasn't prey. And the Galactic Union was about to learn that the hard way. The Galactic Union's war councils buzzed with unease. Reports of the Vorthian hunters' defeat reached High Commander Orveth within hours. A single human had managed to outmaneuver and destroy one of their deadliest warriors. To Orveth, this wasn't just a setback, it was an insult. "Deploy the Devastators," Orveth barked, his command echoing through the chamber. The Devastators were his elite shock troopers, genetically enhanced and equipped with the most advanced technology the Union had to offer. If Ethan Cole was a phantom haunting their forces, the Devastators would be the exorcists. But Orveth was not a fool. He knew brute force alone wouldn't be enough. "Send a reconnaissance fleet to Earth's orbit," he added. "I want to know every move these humans make. Leave nothing to chance." Ethan had returned to his hidden sanctuary, an underground bunker deep within what remained of the Appalachian Mountains. The walls were lined with stolen alien tech, maps of alien troop movements, and crates of salvaged supplies. A holographic map flickered in the center of the room, displaying Earth's major cities, most now under alien control. He patched into the Resistance's encrypted channel, his voice steady despite the chaos he'd just survived. "They are sending more," he said simply. "More?" "Like the hunter," a voice replied, crackling through static. It was Mara, one of the Resistance leaders. "Worse," Ethan replied. "They won't make the same mistake twice." There was a pause. "Ethan, you can't keep doing this alone. We need to coordinate, hit them where it hurts." "I'll think about it," Ethan lied. He disconnected before she could argue further. The Devastators arrived on Earth in a storm of fire and steel. Their drop pods crashed into the planet like meteors, each one containing a heavily armored soldier. They moved with precision, sweeping through human-held areas and leaving destruction in their wake. Ethan observed their movements from afar, his jaw tightening as he watched them decimate a resistance outpost. The Devastators were unlike anything he'd faced before. They didn't just rely on their advanced weapons, they were hunters, methodical and relentless. He needed a plan, and he needed it fast. Using his knowledge of the terrain, Ethan set a trap near an abandoned industrial complex. The area was littered with rusted machinery, its twisting corridors perfect for ambushes. He rigged the place with explosives, tripwires, and makeshift EMP devices crafted from alien tech. If the Devastators were coming for him, he'd make them regret it. It didn't take long for them to find him. Their sensors had tracked his movements, leading them straight to the complex. Ethan watched from the shadows as the first squad entered, their heavy footfalls echoing through the empty halls. He triggered the first trap, a series of explosions that collapsed part of the structure, isolating the squad from reinforcements. Then, he struck. Using a mix of sniper fire and hit-and-run tactics, he picked off the Devastators one by one. But these soldiers were smarter than the average alien grunt. They adapted quickly, using drones to flush him out and forcing him into a deadly game of cat and mouse. Ethan's heart pounded as he darted through the labyrinth of machinery, his mind racing. He couldn't keep this up forever. The Devastators were closing in, their relentless pursuit driving him deeper into the complex. Finally, he reached his fallback position, a control room overlooking the factory floor. From here, he could detonate the EMP devices, taking out their drones and disrupting their comms. But it was a gamble. If it didn't work, he'd be cornered with no escape. He activated the EMP, the pulse sending a ripple through the air. The drones fell from the sky, their systems fried, and the Devastators' movements faltered as their comms went dark. Ethan seized the moment, unleashing a barrage of fire that took out 2 more soldiers. But the victory was short-lived. One of the Devastators, larger and more heavily armored than the rest, burst into the control room, its plasma cannon glowing with deadly energy. Ethan dove for cover as the cannon fired, the blast disintegrating the console behind him. He was out of options. His traps were spent, his ammo low. But as the Devastator approached, its weapon charging for a final shot, Ethan noticed something, the exposed power core on its back. With a burst of adrenaline, he lunged forward, using a crowbar to pry open the armor plating. The alien roared in rage, swatting at him, but Ethan held on, jamming a grenade into the core. He rolled away as the explosion ripped through the Devastator, its body collapsing in a heap of smoldering metal. Ethan staggered out of the complex, his body battered but his spirit unbroken. He knew this was just the beginning. The Galactic Union wouldn't stop until Earth was theirs, or until humanity proved once and for all that they weren't prey. They were predators. And Ethan was ready to teach them that lesson, one battle at a time. The Galactic Union's command center hummed with tense energy. High Commander Orvith stared at the holographic map of Earth, his clawed hands gripping the edge of the console. The reports coming in were infuriating. Another squad eliminated, his adjutant said cautiously, her tentacles twitching nervously. The human is proving more resilient than anticipated. Orvith growled, his teeth bared. This Ethan Cole is not just resilient. He's a symbol. If we let him continue, he'll inspire others. This ends now. Ethan's reputation had grown beyond Earth. Resistance cells whispered his name, and even some alien species under the Union's oppressive rule began to take notice. For Ethan, the fight wasn't about glory. It was survival. But with each battle won, he realized he was becoming something more, a rallying point. He was holed up in a derelict skyscraper, its top floors converted into a makeshift command post. Resistance fighters joined him, bringing supplies and intel. Mara was among them, her sharp eyes scanning the room. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest," she said, handing him a data pad. "Union reinforcements are on their way, an entire fleet." Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. "They are not giving us any breathing room." Mara smirked. "That's because you keep embarrassing them. But if we're going to survive this, we need a plan. A real one." The Galactic Union's fleet arrived in Earth's orbit with a show of overwhelming force. Dozens of warships cast shadows over the planet, their weapons bristling with destructive potential. Orvith had come personally, determined to crush the resistance once and for all. Ethan and Mara watched the ships from their vantage point, the tension palpable. "They are not holding back this time," Mara said. "They think they are invincible," Ethan replied. "We need to prove them wrong." Their plan was audacious. Using stolen Union technology, they'd hijack one of the orbiting ships, turning its weapons against the fleet. It was a long shot, but it was the kind of bold move Ethan had become known for. The Resistance fighters infiltrated the Union ship under the cover of night. Ethan led the charge, his team using stealth and precision to neutralize the alien crew. The corridors of the ship were a maze of glowing panels and strange machinery, but Mara's expertise in alien tech kept them on course. They reached the bridge, taking control after a fierce firefight. Ethan immediately began targeting the nearest warships, the stolen vessels' cannons blazing. The Union fleet scrambled to respond, their once coordinated assault devolving into chaos. The Resistance's bold strike inspired others. Across Earth, hidden resistance cells launched their own attacks, exploiting the fleet's distraction. The Union's forces found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn, their superior numbers rendered useless against the humans' ingenuity. On the ground, Orveth watched the battle unfold with growing fury. His flawless plan was unraveling, and it all came down to one human. Cole, he spat, the name like poison on his tongue. Ethan's stolen ship targeted the flagship, the final blow in a string of humiliations for the Galactic Union. As the flagship's shields buckled under the assault, Orveth realized he had underestimated humanity. They weren't prey. They were predators, fighting for their survival with every ounce of their being. The Resistance's victory was not absolute, but it was enough to force the Union to retreat. Earth's skies cleared, the warships vanishing into the void. For the first time in years, there was hope. Ethan stood amidst the wreckage of the battlefield, the weight of the fight settling on his shoulders. Mara approached, a rare smile on her face. "You did it," she said. "We did it," Ethan corrected. But he knew the war was far from over. The Galactic Union would return, stronger and more determined. But so would humanity. They had proven they were not to be underestimated. And Ethan Cole, the man who had started it all, knew he'd be ready for whatever came next.